Who is the world's coolest dictator? Jason.
Maybe Justin Trudeau.
He is a monster, that one.
Not for long.
León?
I've always been an Orban guy. I mean, Orban likes soccer. I love soccer myself. So if I had to choose, I would probably say Orban. But the honest answer, Dana, is none of them.
Well, our own president is making a fine bid for the role, but I'm sorry, I'm still going to go with the OG, Vladimir Putin.
I mean, to be played on SNL adds to his allure. I agree with that.
This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about, even though we keep snapping rubber bands on our wrists. I'm Dana Milbank, and this week we're talking about the deportation showdown between the Trump administration and the courts. President Trump welcomed the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, to the White House Monday. Bukele calls himself the world's coolest dictator, which must really irritate Trump, who is competing for that very same title. And Bukele has been accepting flights full of immigrants deported from the U.S. without due process and mostly without criminal records. One of those now imprisoned in Salvador's notorious terrorism confinement center, SECOT, is a Maryland father, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. A court order had prohibited the federal government from sending him back to El Salvador because of safety concerns, but the Trump administration deported him anyway, later claiming it was a mistake. At the Oval Office meeting with Bukele, Trump administration officials openly defied the Supreme Court ruling, ordering his return, even taunting the court. To talk about this constitutional standoff, I'm joined by two of my wisest colleagues.
I'm Jason Willick. I'm a columnist at the Washington Post, writing a lot about the courts these days.
And I'm León Krauze. I'm also a columnist at the Post. I write about Latin America, immigration, and other topics.
Excellent. Thanks for joining me. All right, so let's talk more about the case of Abrego Garcia. The Supreme Court, in a rare moment of unanimity, ruled 9-0 last week that the government must facilitate Garcia's return. Yet this week, the Trump administration seems to be thumbing its nose at the ruling. What do you make of this? What happens now?
I don't know. I mean, to break it down a little bit for people, the Trump administration's claim is, well, he's in El Salvador, he's in the custody of a sovereign country, there's nothing we can do about it. And the Supreme Court was very gentle, very almost nudging, and saying, look, you ought to be able to at least facilitate his release. You should be able to tell the court what's going on. And the Trump administration's attitude is, aha, we don't have to do anything. So it's definitely the escalating standoff with the Supreme Court. And I would not be surprised if the Trump administration eventually blinks and finds a way to de-escalate, because that's Trump's way, as we saw with the tariffs, right? Escalate, do a really big thing, then stage a tactical retreat. But if not, we're headed for a continued showdown with the courts.
I mean, the brutal truth here is that this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man who has never been found guilty of any criminal activity, a man married to a U.S. citizen, a father of 3 American children, is in a prison that is hell on earth, reserved for dangerous criminals. And he was sent there by the U.S. government in a mistake that the government itself has acknowledged, and that the Supreme Court, like Jason was saying, has upheld as such. And the American government refuses to intervene on his behalf. The Salvadorian government, which has been in an authoritarian spiral for years now, has no intention of intervening. So this man is completely abandoned on all sides. I couldn't think of a more horrific limbo with no real hope of ever being freed. It's morally repugnant.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I hope Jason is right that they'll find a way to climb down here. But, if anything, what I'm hearing is escalation. So we had Trump in the White House saying, maybe I'll send American citizens to this prison in El Salvador. And if he is planning to do that, I have a nominee. I think the first one to just give it a try should be Stephen Miller. All right. So at this White House meeting on Monday, Bukele said it was preposterous that he return Abrego Garcia to the United States. And Attorney General Pam Bondi said the administration's only obligation is to provide a plane if El Salvador wants to return him. Obviously, the administration has all the leverage it needs to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Can it plausibly keep maintaining this position that it's just helpless to do anything?
Well, they've kept pretty secret the actual terms of the agreement with El Salvador. I think, and a lot of people have been saying, that the judges should try to dig in and try to get these materials that say what the arrangement is here. What's the terms of the custody of these people? How much are we paying? For how long? Who gets to decide? And presumably, we have some control. Of course, the administration's claim is he's a Salvadoran national in a Salvadoran prison. It's a sovereign country. The courts are asking us to do diplomacy that we don't want to do. And, some of that would be straightened out if we actually got a copy of the actual terms of this agreement.
I'm very pessimistic when I think of the future of Mr. Abrego Garcia, Dana. Let me tell you why. I don't think there's any incentive for Bukele to intervene here. I mean, the man went to the White House to sell this very dangerous proposition that the only way to ensure public safety in a country with high crime or with crime in general is arbitrary detention and imprisonment under inhumane conditions. And he went to defend this fantasy that he has no power to return this man to the United States. That is a lie. Bukele has all the power. What is happening is that he refuses to use it to free this innocent man in the same way that he has refused for years now to ensure a fair legal process for the thousands of people that have been swept away into this jail. It's a pure manifestation of authoritarian power, and I just don't see why Bukele would find any incentive to change course. It's his whole image. It's what has kept him in power. I'm very pessimistic.
Yeah. And so this alliance with Bukele in general, what does it say about us? I mean, it sounds like we're sort of aligning ourselves with strong men around the world. Have we become like them? Are we now transactional in that way? I mean, I want to say, are we, starting to live under a dictatorship? But I don't want to get hysterical. I just snapped that rubber band on my wrist. But talk me down from that, gentlemen.
Well, I mean, it's hardly new for the United States to ally with strongmen in various parts of the world or in Latin America when it serves our national security interests as we perceive them. One thing I would say that sort of grates about this is that we're pretending as if El Salvador is a state that respects human rights and is a democratic country and is a model for humanitarian and moral governance, which it's obviously not. I don't mind. We can ally with dictators when it's in our interest, but we're being dishonest about it. We don't live under a dictatorship. That's why people are making a big deal about the administration's need to comply with court rulings. But if that guardrail is sort of bulldozed in this process, we'll have a less law-bound executive, and that will not be good.
I, frankly, Dana, can't think of anything more un-American than what we're seeing now with this very specific collaboration with Bukele and El Salvador. And maybe it's important to just give a little context of what Secot, this jail, really is, right? It's designed to be hell, right? Nayib Bukele created the prison as a deterrent, as a constant threat to Salvadoran gangs. If you're even suspected of being part of a gang, you're going to be sent to this hell on earth, overcrowded by design. There's an average of just 0.6 square meters for each person, 2 sinks, 2 toilets per every 100 inmates. Prisoners confined inside for 23 hours a day, just like solitary confinement in the most supermax prison in the United States. There are no visits of any kind. So it's a place designed to break the human spirit. The fact that the American government is now conspiring publicly to send people who are innocent to this place, I mean, I cannot think of anything more dangerous or un-American.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about how the American public is reacting to this inhumanity from the administration right now. But first, we have to take a quick break. Welcome back. I'm Dana Milbank, and this is Impromptu. Secretary of State Marco Rubio continues to claim that he has the legal authority to revoke visas and deport foreign students by basically criminalizing their speech and claiming they endorse terrorism. Even if this is somehow legal, isn't it un-American? And what kind of damage is this doing to our image abroad?
It depends, Dana, on the case. People who are here on visas who are not citizens have some degree of circumscribed rights. There's definitely been a norm that, it was not thought that for legal speech and advocacy that you would face deportation. So the administration is definitely changing that norm. And I don't know what that will do to the millions of people who either are or want to be, non-citizen residents of the United States and engage in politics. It will certainly make them have less ability to do that.
Listen, when it comes to outside the United States, what I find is that we have a serious disinformation problem, Dana. I mean, recently someone on social media replied to me when I was trying to explain the Abrego Garcia case, and this person asked me how I could possibly defend a terrorist. I think that the government's narrative has been, extremely effective, even though it's based on lies, on half-truths, on misrepresentations. There are people who really believe that Abrego Garcia and all the others sent to El Salvador are terrorists, quote-unquote, or worse, that all undocumented immigrants are criminals or that refugees have no rights in this country. This is striking disinformation, and people like our friend Stephen Miller know it. Not only do they know it, they feed it. We saw it during Bukele's visit. So I think that if we don't find a way to counter this disinformation, the White House's narrative will prevail, and these misconceptions, to say the very least, will remain as to what the immigrant community really is in this country. I think that's an immense challenge. As a Latino journalist, for me, I have to confess it's an obsession.
Mm-hmm.
I think on Abrego Garcia, I don't want this to sound wrong, but I don't think the right way to advocate for this is to say, look at this man, and to make it all about him personally. I mean, he's obviously suffering a terrible ordeal and all of this, but he was here illegally. It was okay to deport him. He was barred from being deported to El Salvador. I'm personally appalled by the use of this CCOT prison and stuff. But the fact is, the American people voted for Donald Trump to deport people here illegally. Right. He won based on that. And I think the argument here is about defiance of the rule of law. It should not be about one individual. I think that people make a mistake in lionizing individual targets instead of focusing on the rule of law and the broader principles that are at stake.
Right, but we can focus on both things. The rule of law, which I agree is the single most important thing here and the biggest threat to us as a country right now. But we could also talk about the inhumanity. I mean, I don't think we need to bring out any individual case. That just happens to be the one before the court. But sending these people for cruel and unusual punishment, I mean, it clearly isn't that upending of our values.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's say you have a death row inmate who committed terrible crimes, and then the government says, well, we don't care about his due process or his right to hear the witnesses against him, and we're just going to kill him anyway. I mean, that's bad, even if the person is a terrible individual. And so I want to keep the focus on the principles, because you end up also lionizing people who then turn out not to be sterling individuals in every case. I think that the left may be making a mistake in making it so much about this individual rather than about due process and lawlessness and the courts and things like that.
I agree with Jason, but I think both arguments intersect in this case, both what Jason is saying and Abrego Garcia's specific story in this country and what he did and didn't do as an undocumented immigrant. Just recently, Aaron Reichlin-Melnick of the American Immigration Council explained it well. I mean, the country to which it was illegal to deport Abrego Garcia was precisely El Salvador, where his life was at risk. A judge ruled in 2019 that it was likely he would face persecution if returned to El Salvador, where he had refused to join a gang. He has never been formally charged nor found guilty of any crime in his 14 years in the United States. I don't know if people in the United States, frankly, voted to have a non-documented immigrant who hasn't been convicted of anything deported into a prison in the conditions that I just described. I would question that, frankly, even though polling shows support for Trump's deportation policies. But once people know what they entail, in the case of Abrego Garcia and other innocents sent to this hellish place, if we do tell the story correctly, I wonder if his standing in this particular issue and his policy standing will suffer.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the polling and President Trump's standing on this issue at home. Now, obviously, the border has always been just about his strongest issue and remains so. Specifically on the handling of these deportations, the polls show the public is split, well, as it is on many things, but it's not overwhelming, at least in support of this. It's sort of down the middle. Do you think that by going too far with this, could he lose support? Could this issue actually wind up hurting him?
A lot of people say, well, what's the remedy if a president defies the courts? And the remedy is public opinion. There are polls. This is what I'm saying about abstracting from the individuals to the larger principle. There's huge majorities, in the 80s that think that President Trump needs to comply with a Supreme Court order. Mm-hmm. Whether that will hold if it were to actually happen is a different question. But I think basically if he's basically in a sustained way and without any more, wiggle room, defying a Supreme Court order, he's going to suffer in the polls. I think that's a really defensible ground for his opponents and a winning political ground, that he's defying the Supreme Court. I think Republican congressmen, at least a handful, would start to sound concerned about it. And I think the voters would render a very unfavorable verdict on that in the midterms.
I mean, Dana, the truth is that of all of Trump's agenda, his punitive immigration policy is perhaps the most popular, right? A post-poll in February found that 9 in 10 Americans support deporting undocumented immigrants accused of violent crimes. That's understandable, but then you have 62% saying the same about those accused of non-violent crimes like shoplifting. 51% approve of his handling of immigration. Listen, those are striking numbers, right? And for me, painfully so. The question for me, again, is whether these polling numbers will hold once people start learning the actual concrete stories of human suffering. I mean, behind every one of those deported or expelled people, there are broken families, children left orphaned, fractured communities. I think journalism should come in and just expose the American public to the stories of concrete suffering in this topic and every other. That's our calling, and that's what we should do. I want to see the polling numbers after that, if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
In Trump's first term, there was a big reaction against his immigration policy. Then Biden came in and overread that and liberalized immigration policy to the extent that Trump, even after everything, was elected again and can impose an even more punitive immigration policy. So somebody's got to just kind of impose a common sense immigration policy and limit illegal immigration.
Yeah. I don't get the sense right now that we're looking at sort of the kids in cages moment, where the public says, hey, too much, gone too far on this. And I don't know, maybe Leon's right that if there's more coverage of this, people will come around and say, hey, this is inhumane and we can't treat people this way. But I definitely think, Jason, you are right that the issue that will rally the public against Trump is the constitutional one.
Stephen Miller, who's the main spokesman for the White House on this, has clearly thought about this. And I think he wants to goad people into making this a fight about this specific individual who was here illegally, who's someone accused of being an MS-13, may or may not be true, who is Salvadoran. And he figures this is an issue where I can get public opinion on this guy so that, people won't care so much about what the pesky Supreme Court says. I think it's important to keep the focus on the fact that it doesn't matter what you think about this guy. This is what the law says, and you've got to follow the law.
Yeah, and a 9-0 Supreme Court.
If we do not explain that Abrego Garcia is not a criminal, not a terrorist, yes, an undocumented immigrant, yes, but not a criminal or a terrorist, then we are feeding Miller's narrative. We are helping that narrative along. If we keep insisting on what Jason and you have laid out as priority, how Trump's defying the Supreme Court is absolutely abhorrent, and we also take our time to rescue the concrete stories of these people, I think there's a clear intersection and a powerful narrative. By the way, Dana, it will never be a kids in cages moment, because you will never see what really is going on inside the Salvadorian prisons, because cameras are not allowed inside, which is part of what's so brutal and sinister about the situation and that specific place.
All right. Well, Jason is going to hammer away at the rule of law. Leon's going to hammer away at the inhumanity of it all. And I am going to hammer away at the world's least cool dictator, Stephen Miller. With that, we've got to wrap this up. Thank you both for joining this episode of Impromptu.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson and Regina DeHeer, edited by Demir Marusic, and mixed by Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please let us know what you think about the current debate over deportation. Send an email to impromptu@washpost.com. And be sure to tune in Friday to hear our colleagues Drew Gawns and Molly Roberts talk about topics other than politics.